comment hearings on remote public comment. That was a success. And next, the announcement is that in case you have not yet registered, the REP Coalition, Race and Equity and All Planning Coalition, has a 6-week series on taking back our city, and it has to do with the housing element. So tomorrow's the last day that you can register. And I understand they have 113 people already registered. So David Wu, have you sent out something announcement to HANC or eBlast, or do people have
thanks, Anastasia. Yeah, I don't I'm not sure if we sent out a blast yet, but I don't know if anyone who's on the HANC board, who's on Zoom, is able to pop the registration link in the chat. But it's open to HANC is a member of the REP Coalition, and it's open to members of organizations. So anyone who's a member of HANC can apply to be a part of the training. So I don't know if maybe any of the board members can dig through their email and they're able to throw that registration link in the chat, that would be great. And if folks are interested, they can talk to me afterwards too.
This is Nick. I'd like to make a public comment.
Yeah, 1 sec, Nick. Anastasia, is there anything else for you?
That's it. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Nick, for announcements. Go ahead.
Yeah, in connection with the controversy that Mandelman generated by introducing the bill to limit public comment, I sent a immediate disclosure request to Supervisor Raphael Mandelman, asking him for all communications for the last 2 years that went to every member of the Board of Supervisors, including the mayor. And they've so far responded, and I expect to get them. I'll let you know just how this thing transpired. And even though it seems to be temporarily dead or dying, I wouldn't be a bit surprised if he brings it back. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Nick. Thanks, Nick. Any other announcements? I'll quickly make an announcement that HANC started a petition regarding the DMV site that's on Divisadero to be prioritized for 100% affordable housing for the city to advocate in the state for the state to prioritize building 100% affordable housing on the site. So we started a petition to the California DMV, and we'll try and put that in the chat. I don't know if maybe someone else can dig it up, or I can try and throw it in there later. Or also, if you just Google HANC San Francisco DMV petition, it'll come up on change.org. So thanks. All right, well, I think we'll just go into our first topic for today. So we're very glad to be joined by Chair Eric McDonald and committee member Gloria Berry, who are part of the San Francisco African American Reparations Advisory Committee. And so the city of San Francisco has began to undertake the question of reparations for Black San Francisco residents and what that would look like. And there was a report that was produced by the advisory committee. So we've invited them here today to speak about the report and their work on their advisory committee. So maybe I'll pass it over to you, Chair McDonald and Gloria Berry. Thanks for joining us.
Again, David, thank you and the council for inviting us. Gloria, did you want to start since you are the connection to this great group of folks? Or did you want me to start? Uh-oh. I think she's trying to unmute.
Thank you, Chair. Exactly what I was trying to do. I will start. I just need to know what my time is.
Yeah, so we have until about, let me see, check the time, about an hour. So if, I mean, you all, it's open for you all to speak and present and share, and we can open it up for questions also.
Wonderful. I'll do my opening statement in under 10 minutes and then pass it to the chair of the Reparations Committee. And the beginning of your meeting, you started off with announcements. So I would like to make an announcement that the Reparations Committee is holding a rally with Supervisor Shaman Walton Tuesday at noon. If you find the link and RSVP, you can come eat with us. And then we will go into chambers about 3. The hearing will start, which will probably be up to an hour, depending on how long the supervisors ask questions. It could be under an hour, but there will be public comment and you can call in as well. So I want to start with that announcement. Other than that, I am Gloria Berry. I want to thank Kristen Evans for inviting me in the chair and making the connections with this body. I see ally Renee in the audience. Hi, Renee. And
You have to talk to Michael, Carolyn. I'm watching this broadcast here. The
Oh,
Zoom.
sorry, whoever's speaking,
Michael,
could you
yeah,
please mute yourself?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure.
I think maybe that's
Uh,
Nick.
okay, a little bit
Sorry.
about,
Keep going.
I was born 1969 on Grove and Divisadero Street. Haight Street has always been a frequented area of mine, and it was always a special connection. In my opinion, the Black community and the Haight Street community always had a connection. I went to high school with a lot of people from Haight, and they voted me in the office in high school and signed a petition in the 80s for us to get Black music at our dances because they didn't play any Black music. So that's my little history on Haight in the Black community. So I wanted to say that with reparations, I feel like a lot of you are already allies and don't need convincing of how racist policy is here in San Francisco and has always been. I can tell you my little short story of growing up on Grove Street. My family lived there for 18 years between Divisadero and Scott Street. And during redevelopment of the Fillmore period, the whole district, Western Addition is called now, we were evicted. And my mother and the other 5 Black families in the building were not blight. We were all working families. My mother was a secretary and my father a cable car driver. We were evicted and I had just joined the Navy. So when I didn't have a place to come home to, I re-enlisted in the Navy because 1, I couldn't afford college, and 2, I didn't have anywhere to live if I got out. So then I came back to San Francisco and I still was feared not being able to find housing. So I ended up marrying someone to live on the Presidio base here in San Francisco, not because of love, but for shelter, you know? And then we got evicted from there because the Army didn't want Navy people living on the Presidio Army base. So fast forward, I moved out the city to afford housing, and then I became homeless. And that's why I'm on the reparations committees, because I feel seat number 7, which is someone who has experienced homeless. I was homeless for 3 years and a veteran and could not get housing in San Francisco. They sent me to a shelter called Next Door on Polk Street, and I didn't last past 3 a.m. because it was violent, unsafe. Somebody tried to steal my boots as soon as I walked up in there, and it was just not a healthy environment. They then sent me to a shelter called Detox, and I didn't make it there past 30 minutes because I wasn't detoxing, but it was the only place they could find a bed for me, and I don't even use drugs. So then they sent me to transitional housing on Treasure Island, and they didn't assess us. So they put me, someone who just lost their house, found out they had cancer and couldn't work, and they didn't assess us. And I had severely mentally ill people put in the same room with me that needed more help on their end, but didn't fit my situation. So to make a long story short, it's not easy here in San Francisco, especially when you're Black, a woman. Women veterans are, the rise in homelessness for women veterans is growing. And that's just the living situation, you know. I went to public school up to 6th grade. I was placed in the gifted program. And then when I got to Presidio Middle School, my whole class was white. And the teacher, Mr. Olson, we don't remember all our teachers' names, but Mr. Olson was very discouraging, very dismissing. Every time I asked a question, he would just glare at me and sigh. And it just felt like I was alone. And that was my experience in the public school system. And my mother then ended up sending me to private school. And back then in the 80s, we had several private schools that were middle school level that were culturally competent to Black children. We had Cathedral Intermediate, Sacred Heart, St. Dominic's, even Mission Dolores. And then at the high school level, we had Star of the Sea. None of that exists now. None of that. There's no options. So that's alluding to the fact that on the reparations committee, I am the committee lead on education, because there's so much harm done to us through public school education, through how the city views Black children, that it's been something that's existed way back, at least until the 70s. Furthermore, I wanted to add that you probably all know I'm on the DCCC, and for all you who supported me, thank you. But I'm used to public speaking. I'm used to talking with allies and comrades, and you know, the Bernie Kratz endorsed me, Milk Club, the League of Pissed Off Voters and whatnot. And that's where I'm comfortable. But there's Black people here in San Francisco who might not get in line Tuesday and make public comment. They might not feel safe to express themselves the way they do. And that's the voice that I want to push out, or who we need to look out for. For that person who's laying down in the Tenderloin with their face in some urine, with their pants off their butt, and maybe some fentanyl in their system. We need to do a reparations package that's going to meet all these needs of people who have been looked over and policy has harmed them for a long time, to where it's generational. We need our allies to join forces with us, because if you review our 111 recommendations, there's half of them that's going to benefit everybody. If we bring wellness and maybe meditation in the schools, they're not going to call the reparation kids out and conduct that. They're going to start that school day off with everyone. If we get different solutions for housing, everyone's going to benefit with less homeless. If we get programs that are going to help those who are justice involved, it's going to benefit everybody. Drug treatment, all kinds of different programs. It's more than just one recommendation. There's 111, but I think I'm at 10 minutes. I'm not sure. Most of you know I speak from my heart, and that I speak to you from a place where you're my brothers and sisters, and we really need ally support and endorsements to make this stronger, so that these board of supervisors and the mayor can see that there's strength in numbers, and that this is a citywide desire to lift up people who are in the place of the numbers that shows the worst in disparities in every category you could think of. So thank you. I'm going to pass it off to the chair of the reparations committee. I'm so thankful he is here tonight, Mr. Eric McDonough.
Thank you so much, Gloria, and appreciate you sharing all that you did share, and in particular your own lived experience. I don't say this in any way to compare, or certainly not to compete, but I too am a native San Franciscan. I did not grow up in the Haight. I grew up in the Fillmore, born in San Francisco General Hospital, public schools of San Francisco, through and including high school, City College of San Francisco, and then USF. So this has been my home, both to learn, to work, to learn, to work, and to play. And so that is what brings me to this work, because in all of that, my lived experience, I have always been very, sometimes very painfully aware of San Francisco being a wonderful city and a tale of two cities. That at once, San Francisco, our city of St. Francis, has been the home of opportunity and wealth, frankly, for many. And then at the same time, a place of discrimination and poverty for many, many more. And so that's why this work is important to me, that we in San Francisco, being often the trendsetters as we have been on many social justice issues in the past, I believe San Francisco has an opportunity to do the same in the context of this reparations. A little bit more context for the work that the committee has been doing. For those that don't know, the committee, the charter rather, that was adopted unanimously by the Board of Supervisors, was done so in December of 2020, following the George Floyd murder and the national and even global civic unrest around continued pervasive abuse and discrimination. And so the President Walton at the time drafted the legislation that ultimately led to the charter and unanimous adoption that stood up this committee. 2021, the committee was populated with 15 members. Each member is holding a particular seat, or occupying rather, a particular seat that is either based upon an area of expertise or a lived experience. And you heard Gloria talk about her lived experience and the seat that she fills. And so this 15-member committee, based upon the charter, commenced to do two things most fundamentally. One, to research and chronicle the harm perpetrated on Black San Franciscans since the beginning and founding of San Francisco to the present. And then two, determine and then recommend measures of redress and repair based upon those harms that were, again, perpetrated by the city and county of San Francisco. And so the committee spent roughly about 18 months doing just that, chronicling the harm. Sometimes we affectionately called it gathering the receipts that demonstrate how the city has been culpable and is culpable for those harms. And then we set out to draft measures of redress and repair. And as Gloria said, the committee determined 111 recommendations in this draft report. The charter calls for us to, as we did in December of 2022, submit the draft report. And in June of this year, 2023, we'll submit kind of the final report per the charter. The report is based upon the division of work and focus in 4 areas: education, as Gloria mentioned, and she chairs, health, economic empowerment, and policy. And so if you have, you will know. If you haven't, we certainly encourage you to review the proposed sets of recommendations for redress and repair. I won't go through them. What I will say at a high level is the committee held, I would say, 3 primary intentions in drafting the aggregate of these recommendations that are in the report. One, first, to redress the past harms, redress and repair, the past harms. Number 2, to intervene on some current policies and practices that are continuing to perpetrate harm on Black San Franciscans. And then 3, equally as important, Our intention was to create pathways, both to opportunities, access to benefits and services, all of which leading to pathways towards generational wealth. We believe that when you really zoom in on in addition to the tragic, worse than tragic effects of the physical realities of chattel slavery, and while most obviously would appropriately say, but that didn't take place in San Francisco. However, we have to consider that 250 years of slavery, 90 years of Jim Crow, 60 years of separate but equal, and then 35 years of racist housing policy, right? So while chattel slavery didn't find its way to San Francisco was a haven for the Ku Klux Klan. And so all of the efforts to bring harm to Black San Franciscans found its way into San Francisco, not all at the hands of Ku Klux Klan. That's not my point. My point is that harms continued in our city. And so, again, we represent policies, practices, access, as well as cash benefits to Black San Franciscos are all represented in the report. And I will conclude there. I'm happy to answer questions folks have.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much, Gloria and Eric. Appreciate you both going through that. And yeah, let's open it up to questions, both either in person or on Zoom. Maybe Bruce, if you want to go to the full screen so you can see better. But yeah, if folks want to maybe raise their hand, or they could potentially put questions in chat also. Kristen, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much. Really appreciate you coming to meet with us and to talk about the reparations report and recommendations. I was wondering if you could speak about what the reaction has been since it was released. In particular, how do you feel the media coverage has been? It seemed like there was a lot of attention and focus on the $5 million figure. And then secondarily, I think we, as a HANC board, we're also curious to understand how does this interact, if at all, with the California state level reparations work? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. So on the first part of your question, in terms of reactions and responses, I guess to put it fairly plainly, allies thought it was an important first step to finally grappling with specific opportunities to bring redress and repair. And then there was the other side of the reactions that in particular were media. Much of the media, as you referenced, only paid attention almost exclusively. It was as if our report was one page and one recommendation, with no recognition of or attention to, again, 111 recommendations. And so on that side of the equation, much of that was driven by conservative media, quite frankly. And so I have done a number of media interviews where that's concerned. And again, most focusing on the $5 million and most focused on a semblance of questioning, not only of the merits for $5 million, but also the whether or not there's actually a case for it in terms of the harm perpetrated on Black folks, Black San Franciscans over in our history. And then your second question, I'm sorry, can you repeat the second question? Oh, the relationship to California. So the relationship most centrally is candidly, the California task force has quite a bit more resources on research and assessment, economic and otherwise, and so we've been able to benefit there. But what's important to hold in terms of distinction of the roles is that San Francisco is focused on the harm perpetrated by the city and county of San Francisco on Black San Franciscans. And California, its charge is to focus on the harm perpetrated by the state of California, the state as an agency, as it were, on Black San Franciscans. And so they're parallel tracks, but they're not kind of either codependent or reliant upon each other.
Thank you. That makes a lot of sense.
Thank you for the question.
Great. Thanks. Karen, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd really love to hear a lot more about the information you guys pulled together. So I'm hoping that when you present to the Board of Supervisors, you'll be going into a lot more detail of each of those categories. Is that what I can expect?
Actually, we have roughly between 10 and 15 minutes
Oh,
in terms of
no.
presentation. So, no, I would not invite you to expect great detail. Again,
That's
hopefully
insulting.
all of you have access to the report itself. And so, yeah, that's
Unfortunate.
Yeah.
Good luck.
thank you.
Yeah, we had one question in the room here too. What's the best way to access the report, or how can folks see the report, the draft
Sure.
report?
What I will try to do as we are talking is grab the link and drop it in the chat, because that'll likely be fastest and easiest, because while it is on both the HRC website as well as the sfreparations.org, it is not always easy to find. So let me do that as we are talking.
We also included it in the HANC newsletter for announcing this meeting.
Fantastic. Thanks for.
Great, thanks.
I got it. D asks, can you explain why the eligibility criteria for reparations at the state level are so different than those proposed in San Francisco?
That's a little tricky to answer because they decided what they decided. I don't know if I can speak to the why. However, here's what I'll offer. There is, as you may be aware of or appreciate, there is a national, discussion around reparations. And there are, generally speaking, two schools of thought and perspective. One is that there should only be discussions about reparations to Black Americans that are for direct descendants of slavery. So that is a perspective held by many, and that is represented by many. Conversely, there is a school of thought, a perspective held by many that holds that while chattel slavery was, if you will, the original sin, as I referenced at the top of the presentation, the 90 years of Jim Crow, the 60 years of separate but equal, the 35 years of racist housing policy, and the list goes on in terms of the ways in which harms were continued. There are those who hold that all of those harms should be accounted for at the appropriate levels, again, municipalities, state governments, as well as the federal government. And as many may also know, the federal government has yet to take any action in this particular case. That HR 40 was first brought to the floor of Congress in 1989 and has been annually not allowed to even be brought to a vote, and so it still languishes on the floor. If it were passed, it would create a federal body that would look at the harms perpetrated by the federal government. So again, back to the question, why are they so different? What prevailed in that discussion, the state task force discussion, was the point of view around direct descendants, and what prevailed in the discussion with the San Francisco committee was the decision around all of the harms, not just the specific act of chattel slavery. Gloria, were you going to add to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to add it, just as a FYI, that at the last Democratic County Central Committee of San Francisco, I introduced a resolution to support local reparations here in San Francisco, California State, and also Senator Booker's. He introduced doing a study at the federal level for it at the Senate offices. But how the interesting thing is the day I introduced it, Congresswoman Pelosi's office called me and said they'd like to add HR 40, like Chair McDonald mentioned, onto the resolution, and it passed. And that's just wonderful news. And it's also a good way to show that it's a movement, you know. So thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. David, go ahead. David Hartzell, are you able to unmute yourself? Or could, okay, thanks, Bruce. There you go.
Thank you very much for your excellent work and your helpful proposals. I was wondering how or where will the funds to really implement all these excellent proposals come from? And how will it be allocated among all the needs you've laid out to us? And the policy decisions or proposals, do the Board of Supervisors need to support those, or how do they get implemented?
Thank you, David, for those questions. So I'll start with the second one and then work my way to the first one. All of the proposals, the recommendations have to be approved by the Board of Supervisors. So none can or will be implemented without that approval, including the policy. But just to be clear, not only the policy, all of the recommendations. And so that will be a matter for, obviously, therefore, the board to take up and make some decisions, which leads to the answer to the first question. Our role in this process per the charter was not a feasibility study. I would have likened what we were called to do. I would liken it to a house appraisal. You invite a housing appraiser to come and appraise your home. They don't tell you what the market will bear. They tell you what the house is valued at. Similarly, our role was to chronicle the harm and assign the value. And now it's the role, the market in this context will be the Board of Supervisors to determine whether that's more than we're willing to pay, less than we're willing to pay. That's their role. So to your question of how will this be financed, that is really a good and important question, and a question for the Board of Supervisors and the city.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. I think we got one question in chat.
Yeah. How will this work going forward? Will San Francisco citizens vote on this, or is this purely a supervisor decision?
That is a good question. Again, I'm not saying it's time to dodge the question. That is a good question that the Board of Supervisors will have to determine. My guess, and I say it that way because we haven't had any discussions yet about it. What will ensue following our hearing on Tuesday, which will be the first time to really begin to engage around this. It will be those discussions around what are the priorities that they want to hold, what are the priorities that the committee would ask them to hold if in fact they choose not to or can't respond in the affirmative to all of the recommendations. And so that will begin a process of deliberation and discussion and some negotiation, et cetera. And then once that's determined, the board and the mayor's office will have to determine the path of implementation. And I can imagine, again, but it's just imagine that some of that will require voter approval, and that some will not, that it will be folded into the administrative procedures of the city and or the budgeting process of the city.
Great, thank you. And we have Gloria here is in person. She flew from the screen to our in-person room right here. So yeah, good to see you here. And if we can get her a mic and if we have want to respond to anything. I think we'll go. I think I see someone said they can't hear. CC. I'm gonna go to Karen. Go ahead.
Yeah, after several years of work, why are you only getting 10 minutes to speak at the Board of Supervisors? That doesn't make any sense at all to me.
I concur. I mean, I don't know how to respond to the why. I didn't make that decision, obviously. That was a Board of Supervisors decision.
Wow.
But just to be clear, this is the first of what likely will become many. So this isn't a one and only, a kind of a one and done.
Thanks.
Thanks. Calvin, go ahead.
Thank you, David. I wonder, Eric, what exactly is before the board on this month? What is the item? Is it a resolution? Is it the submission of a report? Is it an ordinance? Is it a proposed ordinance? Is it a proposed ballot measure? Do you have any idea what the actual proposal is? And I have a follow-up.
Sure. So thank you for the question. On Tuesday, the item is the hearing of, or hearing on rather, the draft report of the reparations
Okay.
advisory committee.
So it's a hearing on the report.
Yes.
So it requires no action of the Board of Supervisors.
It does not.
Is there a group of San Franciscans working on preparing a package? Because it occurs to me, as you have outlined, in order to implement this, it will require at least an ordinance passed by the Board of Supervisors, drafted and passed by the Board of Supervisors, a budget allocation that generally has to come from a department or the mayor. The board has no ability to initiate a budget item. They can add it once the budget is presented to them, but budgetary items originate in the executive branch, not in the legislative branch. One wonders if the mayor has been talked to, if she has developed an ordinance or a package. And also, as you say, it seems to me that some items in order to implement this program, probably funding, will have to be voted on by the voters, will have to be approved by the voters. So there were most likely necessary to be a piece of legislation, an administrative decision, a budget item coming from either the department or the mayor, and a ballot measure of some sort, pending, the opinion of the city attorney on all of this. Is there a group from the committee that is working on putting together a process to come up with those, or is that all now in the supervisor and the mayor's court?
Well, first, just appreciate again all that you have outlined and in your questions in terms of the process. What I would say first is all of how what you just outlined will play out begins with, I would suggest or submit a first question, which is what level of intention will the Board of Supervisors determine to take or not? So what that means very plainly is that the Board of Supervisors could hear this report and take no action at all. That is on the kind of in the realm rather of possibility. So to everything you said, yes, and that has not been determined. It will be maybe not the best word, but triggered by where the board determines it will land collectively on actions they determine to take. Again, 111 recommendations, right? So they could choose 1, 2, or 50, or 111. And all of that will then create the domino effect of what follows. To your point, the executive branch and its budgetary responsibilities and authority, the departments and their authority and budget and policy and practice responsibilities, all of that will potentially come into play. And a role of the committee, once we get, again, some indications of what the board is willing to commit to doing, will follow that. I should say, that said, that as the charter goes, the committee is scheduled to sunset in January of 2024. So we will submit the final draft and report in June of this year. And then again, per the charter, which does have a proviso for the board to take some action to extend, et cetera. But short of that, the committee will sunset. And so at that point, should that take place, there would not be any standing entity to take up any of the work that you just outlined.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just my little 2 cents. Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hey, Kat and Richard. I didn't recognize Richard, but yeah, exactly what the chair said. And also, we do have plans on meeting with the mayor's office to discuss budget. And there's things that can be done that are already in the budget. For example, we want more Black culturally competent medical care. Dr. Amos Brown is the committee lead on healthcare. He met with Dr. Colfax yesterday. He's on board with making some adjustments in medical care because we are highly failed by medical here in San Francisco. So there's ways of getting some of these recommendations done that might not cost extra money, might just be a matter of moving some money, leveraging funds, and reestablishing priorities. So we have to think of that there. And then in the education sector, same thing. There's millions of dollars in the individual learning plan budget that's just sitting there. Why aren't they using that? You know, use it towards reparations to get those performing at the lowest levels up to par and find out what their learning assistance or any assistance they need is, give them a learning plan and let's go. We don't need extra money for those type of things. Let's just do it. You know, this is what we at $14 billion now. You know, so that's my 2 cents.
Thanks. I think, can we go to, where did he go? Oh, I think we lost him. Okay, let's go to Tab.
Thank you very much, Gloria and Eric, for your very informative presentations today. If within your capacities, you're not able to comment on this, just say so. But I'm just curious as far as what sort of grassroots strategies are in place and as far as involving the public to promote these particular recommendations and lobbying the Board of Supervisors in support of it. I'd just be curious to know anything about that you're able to share.
Gloria, you want to respond first?
Yeah, I'm definitely boots on the ground. I got the flyers in my trunk right now. I'd love to hang one up here if you have a space for that. Other than that, we're using our social medias. 10 people tell another 10 people, word of mouth. We're going to go to all sorts of community-based organizations. We got Glide on the calendar. We've been up at USF. We're going to go to a plethora of places and meet with community members. I'm interested in getting some folks from a drug program, addiction services program. Hopefully they'll show up at the rally Tuesday. I talked with them. And we're just trying to hit up everybody, including our allies. Our allies are the most important. Japanese reparations, they had allies. It wasn't a me, it was a us.
And the other thing about is we're all going through just everything Gloria said, and we appreciate Gloria's leadership, boots on the ground. A letter writing campaign, we're inviting folks to write their supervisors for their respective districts, as well as continuing what I'm calling kind of our circuit. I have gone almost everywhere anyone has invited me or members of the committee to speak. And so I'm scheduled to be at not Temple Emmanuel. I apologize. I can't remember the number. There's so many. At any rate, yes, we're going to do all that we can, and within the confines of our resources to enlist as many members of community and allies as possible.
There, am I back? Okay, thank you. Tess, go ahead.
Yes, thank you both for presenting tonight, and I'm sure we're going to have a lot more questions as we get to dig into the report. Really appreciate this. I am a little bit confused about the money situation though, because I've been told that the mayor creates the entire budget and that the board has very little that they can do on it. Frankly, I think you'll get a lot of support for your work at the board, but it does seem to me that the mayor has the bulk of the city funds in her pocket. Now, of course, there's a couple of agencies like the PUC that have separate ones, and the airport. And am I mistaken about that? Does the board have
No.
No.
No, not at all. You are correct. As we talked about earlier, the executive branch, the mayor has budget and budgetary authority and responsibility. So on part, as it relates rather to the financial and or budget items, yes, ultimately the mayor's office will have to endorse and approve those. As Gloria mentioned, we will be meeting with the mayor first the mayor's budget director and then the mayor to get an initial kind of take on her and her team's perspective around all of this, and then like most of this, what will follow will be advocacy.
Well, I think you can count on us to be part of your allies.
Well, thank you so much. We certainly appreciate that, each of you.
And also, I just wanted to be clear that during the gold rush, slave owners brought their slaves to San Francisco for labor purposes. When the shipyard was built, Black people migrated to San Francisco because it was a great opportunity for living wage jobs. However, when they got here, they were only allowed to live in certain neighborhoods by law. And crime at the time was low. There's a documentary about the Fillmore where you could walk down the street with $100 in your pocket, hanging out. Everybody could see it, and no one would take it because everyone had $100 in their pocket. And the reality is, San Francisco does not need Black people for labor anymore. They do not need us. I'm 12 years in tech, couldn't get a job here in San Francisco. They don't want me in that field. It's not, it's just resources. They want us gone. We are the fastest gentrified culture, we're the only one really in San Francisco, whereas we're being pushed out through policy. So I appreciate the member of this body that said she is an ally. I hope you all will be. And we need to figure out how to pay now or pay more later. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions, or even any folks open to folks in the room to
Anastasia has.
Oh,
David,
Anastasia. Yep.
uh, I'm really glad that Nancy Pelosi decided to add herself onto this for support. That is huge. You've got somebody in the federal government who's backing this. So that counts for a lot.
We do appreciate that support. Absolutely. Thank you, Anastasia.
Thanks, Anastasia. Open for others. I guess I have more of a, I guess maybe it's more of a comment, but yeah, encourage folks to take a look at the draft report. And yeah, I think that for me, what struck me was there a lot of history and connections to how like Black Americans have been impacted up to this day. And yeah, very extremely thorough and a lot of recommendations. And yeah, I think what also stuck out to me is just like the concept of redistribution of wealth and economic opportunity and access. And I appreciate the comment too about how you know, doing this would really benefit all people in San Francisco in many ways too, because I think it's something that touches on a lot of other folks and people of color and working class and low income folks in the city too. So yeah, I appreciate it. And yeah, I guess maybe yeah, one final question I had about kind of what the committee, so the committee will kind of disband in the start of 2024, I think. Is that right? What I heard?
That's correct.
So what?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so what is there any like thinking or by like committee members, similar to other questions about continuing to organize around it, but how do you think that might impact or affect, or I guess, or is there any thinking of the committee of what that'll look like to close out the committee once you finish the report and that piece of the work?
Sure. Thank you for that. So there will be, in the context of the final report, a request to do one of two things. Either extend the work of the committee up and until there is a body, a continuing body stood up to hold that space of continued work and accountability, quite frankly. And so that'll be part of the request. Again, it's in the hands of the board supervisors who chartered the body to make a determination around that. So I guess to put it plainly, either they say yes and we continue, or they say no and then we self-organize.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And then David has his hand raised.
Go ahead, David.
Just one small suggestion, unless you're already doing it. As you meet with various groups and people, the suggestion would be to keep the names and contact people and of organizations that are really strongly supportive of what you're doing, which could then help multiply your ability to really get out much broader to a much broader community.
Thank you, David. Appreciate that recommendation. We will take it and run with it.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks, David. Richard, go ahead.
Yeah. Do you have an estimate of the current Black population of San Francisco and an estimate of the number of former Black residents of San Francisco who are still alive?
Really great question. We're still working to assess both. On the first, roughly 60,000. The second one, we're still trying to get our arms around because, as I think most of us know, based upon them having been pushed out of the city, there aren't necessarily neat and tidy records that followed them. So we're working on reaching out. Many of them we have been able to identify through the certificates of promise process that was implemented by redevelopment, but then there are a host of so many more. So we're still working on that.
Great. Thanks, Richard. All right, well, unless any last questions? Well, yeah, I would like to thanks again, Gloria and Eric, for taking time, to talk with us about your work, and thank you for all your work. And so that the hearing is on Tuesday,
That's
correct?
correct.
This coming Tuesday at the board.
3 o'clock. Yep.
3 o'clock. Great. Well,
I
yeah,
have-
thank you.
I have one more question. Is there going to be time for public comment at the hearing?
Yes, there will.
Terrific. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, good question. Thanks. And there's a rally
City Hall steps.
noon at City Hall steps. Okay, Tuesday.
I can send the link to our.
Okay, yeah. Share the link and we can help share it out. Well, yeah, thanks again so much. Thanks for joining us virtually and in person. But so appreciate it.
Thank you, David. Thank you to all of you for your support, and we appreciate the allyship. Have a good evening. Enjoy the rest of your meeting.
Have a good evening.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Gloria.
All right, so we're gonna shift over now to bring up the Veritas Tenant Association and folks from HRC also. Bruce, do you want to?
I just want to say, I just want to thank Achilles and his staff here at Flywheel for allowing us to have our meetings here and ongoing, and really appreciate that.
Great, thank you. Yes, I forgot to mention, and there's food, there's drinks available too. So if you're on Zoom, you can join us next month in person. There's the cafe is open and kind enough to serve and allow us to use the space too. So I want to invite up, do we folks from, great. If you want to come up. Yeah, I'll get another. We'll grab you another stool. And get you some mics. There you go. Yeah, so thanks for coming to join us, and I'll just hand it over to you all.
Thanks, Hank, for having us here tonight. Yes, my name is Lena Maibaum. I'm also born and raised here in San Francisco. It's good to see other San Franciscans still living in San Francisco. My background is mainly customer service and freelance photographer. I live over in Union Square. I moved in about 1996. And my building was purchased in 2016 by the largest corporate landlord known as Veritas. Their advertisement buildings they have is Rent SF Now. That's makes us know that it's a Veritas building. And when they purchased my building, me and my neighbors noticed that we got a rent increase that was called the operating maintenance pass-through, which we didn't understand what it was. One of my neighbors reached out to Housing Rights Committee of SF to have Brad Hearn, who specializes in corporate landlords, to come and help us explain what this is. Also helped us organize our building to prepare us for the rent board hearing when the hearing was to be dated. And while this was happening, we were really organizing and getting a lot to understand what this is, that Veritas canceled the hearing. So that was a very great victory. And I also noticed that there was many signs going up just in my neighborhood. And I thought, however they were doing to me and my neighbors, rent increases, constructions that were done very unsafely, that I can only imagine what they were doing to other buildings. So I decided to do a volunteer with Brad and HRC doing outreach, and started to knock on doors, talk to tenants, informing them their rights and empowering them to organize their building. And so within 2.5 years, I did just that. And then 2 weeks prior to COVID, I got hired as staff full time. So now I dive more deeply into organizing. I'm still, fighting with tenants or fighting with the landlords who are tenants and landlord of Veritas. During COVID, they purchased buildings in Oakland, about 28 in Oakland and 12 in Los Angeles. So within the 7 years that we've been having this association, it's now a state association because of LA. And just about a year ago, HRC and a few of Veritas members, we had passed this law that's called the Union at Home Law. So it's kind of like you can unionize at work, also at home, which is, it's a very powerful tenant ordinance that we are now using and applying it to Veritas buildings. And Veritas owns close to about 300 just in San Francisco. So that's a lot of doors that I've been knocking for several years now. And this is how I met Carl and Vanessa. Carl?
Yeah, I'm Carl. This is Vanessa. We live at 1965 Page. We actually share the driveway with Flywheel here. Thank you, Flywheel. Thanks, Hank. Our building is made up of a mixture of long-term tenants, older tenants, and newer tenants that are paying some pretty high rents. So a year ago, spring of 22, 3 things happened. 1, Veritas bought our building. 2, the Board of Supervisors passed the tenants organizing ordinance. And 3, Veritas, also known as Green Tree, also known as Red SF now, announced their intention to add 4 accessory dwelling units to the garage level of our building. So that's 4 market rate ADUs that would come at the expense of some housing services that we have enjoyed, for going back many, many years. So suddenly on the chopping block were bike racks that at last count held 21 bikes. They were going to cut our lobby in half, shrink our laundry room. Those tenants with parking would probably lose their indoor parking. So we kind of rallied around that. That was sort of a rally point to talking to some of our neighbors about joining together in a tenants union. At the same time, Veritas was coming through and kind of steamrolling through our building, taking out all these beautiful period vintage furnishings, really making it rather ugly, doing some really shoddy construction work, remodeling work. They punched a hole in the bedroom of one of our neighbors while they were upgrading the vacant unit that was next door. So it didn't take too much trouble to actually get a super majority of our neighbors to sign on to the petition and form this union. And, many of them we really didn't know until that point. So at that same time, concurrently, the rent hikes started. So it was a combination of the city's allowable rent increases, capital pass-throughs, and also the banked rents that had been saved up from our previous landlord for going back several years. One of our members over on Sutter Street actually had her rent raised 13%. So it was obviously a pretty obvious end run around rent control. It certainly violated the spirit of rent control. During this time, we were meeting other members of VTAs, Veritas Tenants Associations, hearing all kinds of horror stories, tenant intimidation, endless construction projects that drove people out. Probably the most pernicious is the COVID evictions, several of them being to tenants who don't speak English. Veritas does not allow to have a translator during the eviction negotiations. And this goes on today, even right up through this week. And the thing is, they received 2 federal PPP small business loans to the tune of $3.7 million twice. Twice they got this loan, and both loans were forgiven. and they still carry on with these COVID evictions. So all through the year, we've hooked up with the Housing Rights Committee. They gave us representation at the rent board. We've been able to hold off the ADU, hold them back, the ADU project so far. But we've also, with HRC, have brought together a lot of these other Veritas tenants groups across town, join forces to speak as a single unified voice to fight Veritas and these various abuses. Recently, HRC sent out a survey that all members voted on, or most members voted on, just to prioritize which demands we wanted to make. The top three being: one, cancel all annual increases and pass-throughs from the years 2020 to 2022. Two, no pass-throughs in 2023 and going forward. And three, roll back all previous increases and capital improvement pass-throughs. So our current action right now is the door poster. Thank you. So we've got these door signs that are posted across town in 3 different languages. Here at 1965 Page, we put them up in January. The next day they tore them down. So we immediately put them back up, and they tore them down again. Well, this really pissed us off. So we said, hey, wait a minute. This is our property. This is tennis property. This is theft. It's also an obvious infringement of our First Amendment rights. So we squawked, and we put them back up a third time. And so far they haven't touched them. It's been over a month. But I do know that across town, they have torn down the posters. And, you know, a lot of these tenants, they're more isolated. They're fewer in number. They don't speak English. They've been bullied by Veritas. So I can understand why they'd be afraid to put them back up. So. So anyway, right now there are about 30 Veritas buildings that have joined the VTA, but there are many, many more that really need to join, which is why we're here tonight. We got to get together and, you know, fight back this Goliath. They do back down under pressure. They hate publicity. So it's not impossible. There've been a lot of victories in the last few years. So Vanessa's going to bring it closer to home here in the Western Addition with the other actual Veritas buildings that need to organize.
Okay, my part's going to be shorter, just because of time. As Lena was saying, there are almost basically 300 buildings in San Francisco alone that's owned by Veritas. In one San Francisco zip code alone, they own 92 buildings in that zip code. In our zip code specifically, 94117 in the Haight-Ashbury, they own 20, now I lost count of how many. 18 buildings. So we have compiled a list of those buildings here in the Haight, Alamo Square, and the Nova area. Currently, right now, there are 2 buildings that have the Veritas Association, and there's one that's in the process of starting to petition. We hope that if you live in one of these buildings or know someone who does, that you'll start the petition to create a Veritas Tenants Association. And I am going to read off the addresses that I was able to find. So for the Upper Haight, it's 609 Ashbury, 635 Ashbury, 1995 through 1999 Oak, and 400 through 402 Schrader, 65 Buena Vista East, 100 Broderick, 312 Baker. In the Lower Haight, it's 255 Steiner, 78 Buchanan, 300 Buchanan, which is the building that has started the petition process, 563 Webster, 600 Oak, 430 Scott. And then in the Alamo Square Nova area, it's 990 Fulton, 430 Baker, 430 Scott, 520 Scott, 1240 Hayes, 125 Clayton, and 500 Stanton. So far, the two buildings that have an association is the 1965 Page, which is our building, and 1585 Waller. There are resources and support for you if you have any questions. If you're interested, you can contact myself or Carl directly. I believe our fellow member Susan is going to be putting the contact information in the chat. You can also get in touch with Lena or Brad at HRC. And then there's also the veritastenants.org website. So we are here to give and offer any help wherever we can.
Join us. That's our bit, but we'll answer any questions if there's time.
Much. Yeah, thank you for presenting and your work and organizing. That's awesome to hear about you organizing your building, and that I think you said 30 across San Francisco, 30 buildings have organized. Great. Yeah, let's open up to questions. I guess, could you unpin Bruce so I could just see who's got their hand up? Thanks.
It's Karen
Oh.
and Anastasia.
Thanks. Yeah, Karen, go ahead.
Yeah, since it's basically his reason for living, have you attempted to get or gotten any support or ideas from our Supervisor Preston?
He's been very supportive. So has Connie Chan. They did a city hall demo actually with some of the members. Were you there, Lena? Can you talk about that?
Yes, so supervisors, when this union at home ordinance passed, it was unanimously. So yes, the supervisors are fighting and have made it public that they have our backs and that Veritas needs to do the right thing and at least recognize the ordinance, our association, and come to the table and bargain and negotiate with these demands that we have. And they have not. They've completely ignored us. They tell us that we're reckless and that, we choose not to pay rent because, of COVID, that's our excuse when it's not true. So there was one incident. There was a tenant that lived at 605 O'Farrell. His name is Cedric. He's an 84-year-old senior citizen that they're trying to evict him in the middle of winter during Christmas time. And Dean Preston came out and supported him, made public that they're not going to evict him. There was another case recently, Santos, who is also a senior citizen who is bilingual. Connie was very, very upset that she also made public that, that Veritas needs to not do any evictions during COVID. So we do have support. We also have other supports from Jaws with Justice, Tenants Together, who have done some volunteer work out to do outreach and going out door knocking with us and with Veritas buildings.
Thank you. Good to hear.
Great, thank you. Anastasia, go ahead.
So, you got this legislation passed, tenants' right to organize. So what does this require the landlords to do, and what is the penalty if they don't do it?
That's a good question. So the ordinance is basically a tenants ordinance. It's to have tenants bargain and negotiate with landlords. This is mostly for private housing. It's for buildings that are 5 and more. And it would require tenants to hold meetings in a common area, post posters in the door or in the common area as well. Also to have a quarterly meeting with Veritas by the request of the tenants. It would also have representation, like myself, if I was to go to Carl's in any other buildings to support with the tenants and with Veritas. And if they do not, well, it also entails to get started off a petition to get 50 signatures or more, of course. It would then be submitted to the landlord. If the landlord does not recognize the petition and says that they have not met the requirements, then we would go to the rent board. The rent board would hear both sides of the story and would withhold some sort of percentage of the rent. If until, just as long as the landlord does not abide by these, by the whatever demands that the tenants have, the tenant would withhold that percentage. If and when the landlord does, the percentage they were withholding does not go to the landlord. So it's kind of like a mini strike. And we it's a tool that we try not to use as much because we feel like the power is within the tenants. Does that answer your question, or do you guys want to add?
Basically, a rent decrease would be the penalty that could be imposed by the city. That would be their punishment. I think that's the only one really, is a rent decrease, right?
Yeah. And also doing doing some outreach. So this ordinance is now, it's called like a house service. It's like, same as heat, water. And if any of these are violated, then the landlord will have a penalty with that.
Okay, and so is this being enforced at the rent board? Because I understand they were having a reaction to what the rules were going to be. They wanted to set their own rules.
Yes, we're actually in the middle of putting together our debate with that. So we'll be ready for that.
Okay, thanks.
I see a question in the chat there about apathy and fear. How do we reach them and get them to join? Chances are, if you are a Veritas tenant, you already hate them. You know that if you need some maintenance done, you could be ignored for weeks. They have done some kind of construction or supposed upgrade, and it drives you nuts with the incompetence and the dust and the noise all the time. Something about organizing newer tenants, you figure all these young techies, they can afford it. Well, the fact is, we have a Google and a Twitter, both employees in our building, and they signed right up that they're paying top rents. Also, they could lose their jobs easily in this climate. They may be paying, right at the very edge of what they can afford. So we've gotten a lot of good engagement from the younger, newer tenants too. But yeah, apathy. I mean, once that first rent hike comes around, they're not so apathetic.
Thanks. Lisa, do you want to add on anything to your question?
I do. Okay, so as someone who lives in a 3-unit building who experienced went through iterations of eviction by a really greedy landlord. I put a sign in my window, and I have to commend you for the signs. Solidarity visuals are everything, really powerful, and for people to know. But my other question is to do with, okay, so Veritas in San Francisco, they own over 300 multi-unit buildings. How many buildings are you guys, how many buildings do you have? It's 30 buildings that you have that are organized. So there's a lot more to do, right?
That's why we're here.
Okay, which is great because this should spread like wildfire. Yes.
Actually, it's 30 buildings that have submitted the petition that are using the ordinance. I've been door knocking since 2017. Out of the 30, I would say that we have in contact about maybe a little bit about close to 200, maybe 175. But yeah, we have 30 buildings that are using the ordinance.
Well, thank you so much for doing the work that you're doing, and and for presenting to us, because this is right up our alley, and I'm your ally. I'm itching to help you.
Thank you.
Right on.
In the
Thanks,
chat,
Lisa.
oh, from Kristen, are any of the buildings mixed use with retail storefronts on the ground floor, deluxe bar? Yes.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Club Deluxe almost went out of business, basically. And Dean Preston backed them up and Veritas backed down. And now they are still alive and kicking in the neighborhood.
Can I ask a follow-on question then? Is it, is there a opportunity for commercial tenants then to join the VTA, or no? It's mostly for residents.
No, as long as it's a Veritas building, which they mostly purchase rent control buildings, they are more, they're part of their association because they took out the Paycheck Protection Program loan. Most of those tenants were really pissed off about that. So yeah, they're part of the association for sure.
Okay, so they can join and become part of it. Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. Richard, go ahead.
Yeah, I have two questions. You read off a list of buildings in our zip code. Do you have on your website either a list or map of all the Veritas buildings in the city? That's question one. And then question two is, do you know whether Veritas has complied with the housing inventory requirement?
Sorry, repeat the first question.
The first question is, do you have a list or a map of all the Veritas buildings in the city on your website or easily available somewhere?
Yes, so we had just developed a website less than a month ago. So it needs a lot of sprucing up, but we'll get there. But we do, as I was door knocking, I decided to make a Google map. And yes, so we do have a map of the buildings that we know of that they own. And what was the other question?
Okay, the second question is, as of last July, for buildings with 10 or more units, and this March for buildings of less than 10 units, all landlords are required to register with the rent board various information, and if they don't register, they're not allowed to impose rent increases. So the question is whether or not Veritas has complied with those requirements of registering with the housing inventory. If you go,
That's a really, really good question. That's one of the battles we're trying to fight and win. After the 30 buildings that were recognized by Veritas, and we started the contract campaign, and we call it a contract campaign because we're trying to get Veritas to bargain and come to the table with us. So this is the contract that we're talking about. And since, as Carl mentioned, we did a survey, we did a ratification, and now we're doing the mini poster. So we're doing mini construction test to build up to the point where we don't want to, but go on strike because they're not meeting with our demands or even recognizing us. That they denied a lot of petitions. They say because of vacancies in the buildings. The hard part is that what doesn't count when using this ordinance is if they have a live-in manager, if there's construction happening in the units, and if it's vacant. But the vacant part is where we get stuck because we don't have data if they're vacant or not. I mean, there are some ways to find out, but Veritas is still denying most, if not some of the petitions.
Great, thank you. Yeah, or
You don't mind.
Please.
No. I actually stood on the steps of City Hall and came into therapy. And as my HANC, which is the DCCC,
sorry.
I want to know if you will consider drafting
Some language of a resolution to present to the DCCC to support your efforts and put them on record to see, basically who is on what side. And if that's something you'd be interested in, if you are, we can get one in if the resolution is drafted by Saturday for the March meeting. Otherwise, in April, I'd love to present this matter to the full body.
Oh, yeah. Get them on record. Yeah. That's this Saturday.
Well, my deadline is submitted for the March meeting this Saturday. Otherwise, we have to move it to April
Okay.
for the March meeting.
Yeah, we'll definitely talk about that.
Great, thanks.
Nick has a question.
Yeah, go for it, Nick.
Are there any Veritas buildings in 94110 zip code? Can you tell me that off the top of your head? 94110.
Veritas building, building.
Yeah.
Which neighborhood is that?
Yeah, what neighbor, so you're saying Veritas buildings, Nick, and what neighborhood is that?
Mission, Guerrero Street.
Mission and Bernal.
Yeah. Do you know what? Can you answer that? Do you know?
What's the one on 23rd Street that has been very, very active?
That's 2629 Mission Street.
Across from the post office.
Yeah, actually, they are participating in the poster campaign that I had to go back to their building 3 times because their posters were taken down. So, and in fact, this might be a little off the rail, but there's a building on Larkin Street that did the same thing. Their posters were taken down the next day as everybody had put them up at once. And they were really, really livid to the point where they decided to purchase welcome mats of the poster that Carl showed. And so they haven't placed them out yet. They're waiting for a good time. But, I understand that if a welcome mat is taken away, that it could be like a law or something like that. I've heard something. Yes. So we'll see how Veritas reacts with the welcome mats. It's a test that we're trying it out.
Question about your map. When do you think your map will be done? And please, when it's done, when it will be done, and when it's done, please send us connections. A link to the HANC email list. When do you think it'll be done?
Well, there's a couple of neighbors that are kind of scared to do that, so we're just testing the waters, and we're still talking to them, but we'll definitely let you know how it goes.
But I didn't hear an answer to whether there are any Veritas buildings in the 94110 zip code.
Yeah, anywhere where there's a lot of older, possibly distressed housing, Mission and Tenderloin, Tender Knob, where there's lots of rental buildings, they snap them up. Yeah, in fact, that part of the map of Lena's map, you can't even see the Mission District because of all the bubbles where their buildings have been bought. So if you're in the Mission, you are in the middle of the Veritas Viper's Nest.
But in order to organize, we have to have specific addresses.
Yes, of course.
Please get them as soon as possible. I'd like to help.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nick. Other folks, questions? I didn't realize the rent now SF rent. Yeah, I didn't realize those were Veritas buildings.
The big corporate is Veritas, so it's kind of hard to keep track of where the umbrella branches out to, just because there are different operating names.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good to know.
I actually saw Susan's comment to visit their office. They do, their corporate office is at 1 Bush Street. And just last year, or this 2021, in September, we did a huge march that started at the Berry Building, and we walked over to 1 Bush Street, and we did a civil disobedient act, because we were trying to get them to come downstairs and, talk to us, but they didn't. So we got arrested and made public of that shame to them. So
Yeah,
But
well,
then what, there was a good consequence that came out of
Yeah.
that for you. right?
yeah, one question I was gonna ask, then I'll go to Lisa, was you said like that Veritas doesn't like publicity, so how have you all, or how have you used that to your
That was
advantage,
it,
or how have
but-
the tenants
So
used it?
what did they roll back?
So yes, and yeah, they're super vain about their image, that they don't like to be shamed, and we've done it before many times. In fact, we did a delegation. We went to Yap Peng Yao's house, who's the CEO, to deliver a letter. So the media reporters, there's several reporters that we do trust that they do follow us, and there's yeah. I mean, if you Google Veritas tenants, you'll find a slew of, news articles. If you do video, you'll see a slew of videos, actions that we've done. So, they usually do come back when there's a bad media. They'll email the tenants and say, oh, we'll give you a Starbucks card for $25, and they'll definitely suck up to us after we have shamed them, for sure.
The yoga classes.
Oh, cooking classes, it's just like, no, roll back all the rents and be rent forgiveness. That's what you got to do.
Thanks, yeah, the yoga classes don't cut it.
There was one question that
Mhm.
shouldn't be ignored, and that is how is the door knocking since the ordinance passed? And you're the big door knocker, so
My knuckles are white. It's been very easy because but also difficult. There's a building that I've been trying to complete a petition, but I'm constantly getting kicked out by the manager. And I got kicked out 4 times, and it's hard to complete the petition because there's cameras in the building. And so knowing the manager sees it when they see me or someone coming in to do door knock, he'll react to it that way. But and so it's been somewhat easy because the tenants are calling in our HRC wanting to organize, and it's not just Veritas. We've got Brick and Timber, we've got Mosser, and so it's very exciting to go visit other buildings than Veritas.
Thank you. Bruce,
So wondering, a tenant association is actually a legal binding entity in both California and now in San Francisco as of last year. So how does it work? Does each building, supposedly it's each building, and they form a 501c3. So has that been happening among all the Veritas buildings?
No, not to my knowledge. Actually, if you could refrain your question. Like, I don't understand it.
So the way the law is written here in San Francisco, if there are, I think it's like more than either 3 or 5 units in a building, tenants can form a quote unquote tenant association, and it must be a 501c3, and it elects a chair or co-chairs, what have you. They serve 2-year terms, that kind of thing. So has that been happening in these buildings?
So yes, it's actually a building. If it's 5 or more, then you can legally unionize. It all depends on how the building and the tenants want to form their association. For instance, the largest building that we have using the ordinance, and that, thank gosh, Veritas recognized them, is 57 Taylor Street, which is a 115 unit building. And so what we're trying to, and it's very bilingual, like it's diverse. And so what we're trying to find is organic leaders on each of the floor. There's about 15 units per floor. And so we're trying to have those tenants have a leader and, you know, can not manage their floor. And so once that happens, then those tenants will come together over Zoom and discuss what their floor is going through with the tenants.
And the language of the ordinance is open enough, you know, to interpretation, basically putting the onus, or not the onus, but letting us conduct our union business as we want to. The funny thing is Veritas tries to spin that around. They told us that putting up the signs was a violation of the tenants organizing ordinance. I said, you know, I wrote back, no, you don't get to dictate what this ordinance, you know, it's not for you, it's for us. So yeah, I had not even heard about having to form a nonprofit or anything like that. It's just, it was a big help from the city.
It's also so for 57, that's, you know, but for Carl and Vanessa, how are you guys having, like, do you have captains, like?
Yeah, so in our building, in order for us to create the assistance, we are each building is have 50% plus one
Microphone.
unit. Okay.
Can folks hear?
No.
No, we cannot hear you.
Can you hear me on this one?
Yeah. Okay. You're good to go.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Alrighty. So for each building to create to start the petition process and be recognized as an association, it has to be 50% plus one eligible unit in each building. So in our building, we have the super majority. And as the process was transpiring, we just were asking basically our fellow tenants, you know, who they would want to be representatives of the building. So right now we have 3 representatives in our building.
We're 2 of the 3.
What's an eligible unit?
So we have a live-in property manager, so his unit does not count. And then we also have another unit that's been vacant for over a year. So that doesn't count either. So that's, yeah, so it depends, that was the criteria for us.
The unit is under construction, that doesn't.
So in an 11-unit building, 50% would be 5.5.
You'd need 6.
It'd be, yeah, it'd be 50% plus 1, so it'd be 6 units.
Plus a half.
Yeah.
Thanks. Karen, go ahead.
Yeah, I had a comment, not a question. I just want to say, I really admire how dedicated and tenacious you guys are. I mean, this is a long distance run. Congratulations. Keep it up.
Thanks.
Yes, ditto for sure. And kind of on that note, what's the best way to support you all, or kind of, yeah, if there was like a main ask, maybe you could just reiterate.
Well, as we're here for outreach, I would say that, you know, you're bound to know some Veritas tenants in San Francisco, just because they're so huge. Just letting them know that this tool, empowering tool, is available. Now, there was going to be a big Chronicle piece. Was that killed by the Chronicle?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, which is really too bad, because they interviewed one of our neighbors in our building and had a lot of information. So that's really unfortunate. Every night I Google Veritas and tenants and see what comes up on the news. And it actually made the Chronicle that they went bankrupt, or what exactly happened there?
They defaulted.
Defaulted on their loans. Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, they're kind of in hot water. We really don't know what's going to happen.
Well, yeah. And so like, if like, let's say I knew.
Sorry, did you just say Veritas went bankrupt?
No, they
Could you repeat that?
defaulted on.
No, I did not say that. No. I was wrong.
Can we be lucky?
So yeah,
But
so
they defaulted on some loans that were based on some 1,500 buildings or something like that here in San Francisco. Yeah, well, see, they're an international consortium of investors. And actually, from what I think Brad Kern at the HRC said, they only own 10% of their buildings, and the rest are just this, ominous group of investors from all over.
so like I know if I find out or if I know tenants in a Veritas building and they learn about it and they want to get organized, like what's the best? Should they reach out to like HRC or
Yes.
other Veritas tenants?
Yes, you can reach out to HRCSF, talk to one of our counselors for free. If you mention or have a friend say, mention that they're in a Veritas or Mossa or any large corporate landlord, that they will direct them to Brad and myself.
But don't forget, there's also the VeritasTenants.org website that has kind of a starter kit. It'll get you going there. The fact is, much as you hate to do it, you really have to knock on your neighbors' doors, contact them. I had good luck just by writing a letter and just putting it on people's doors. That at least, kind of got my foot in the door.
Great, thank you. Any final questions or thoughts? Yeah, well, thank you so much. And yeah, it's like behind you all the way, and however we can support and spread the word. And I think someone put some info in the chat too, but yeah, it seems like we got some flyers here too. But thank you so much for coming and speaking today and about all the work you've been doing and organizing. And
Thank you for having me.
yeah,
And
thanks
Thank
again.
you.
Vanessa. Thank you so much.
Yeah, well, so thanks everyone for joining. We have a successful third hybrid meeting. A little less in person today, I think, because of the rain, but still well attended. So thanks everyone again, and hope you have a good rest of your night and stay dry and stay warm. Oh, was that?
Thanks,
Oh
David.
no, I'm. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, David.
Thank you. Good night.